Though this series as a whole terrified audiences with its unique concept and brilliantly crafted atmosphere, fans agree that two Five Nights at Freddy's games have always stood above the others. These two particular entries are vastly different from each other, yet both find very unique ways to leave a horrific impression on players. One of these elite FNAF games is the original Five Nights at Freddy's. The other one that stood out, believe it or not, is Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Despite only releasing 8 months apart, these two games couldn't be more different. But that's exactly why they excel. In the first game, you play as a security guard that has to survive 5 nights in this creepy pizzeria. In the fourth game, however, the situation is much different. Though I absolutely love both of these games, I believe that there's a clear winner regarding which of the two is scarier. The winner to me is Five Nights at Freddy's 4. Hear me out. The way that the fourth game handles its atmosphere, story, and gameplay takes its scares to new heights. This is why Five Nights at Freddy's 4 is the scariest in the whole series. FNAF games have a tendency to portray their atmosphere better than some AAA horror games do. The way this atmosphere comes to life varies from game to game, though. In the first game, I'd say that the animatronic and pizzeria designs are what makes it so scary. Looking through all the rooms on the cameras, this pizzeria certainly looks like it could be a children's wonderland, but there's something off. This something is difficult to put into words, but its absence cannot go unnoticed. Perhaps it's the lack of color in a children's indoor playground. Maybe it's the odd, empty layout of everything. Regardless, everything about the establishment is uneasy. Take a look at some of the animatronics, too. They aren't overly menacing looking, yet not overly friendly either. They have this uncanny look to them. Seeing them stare into the cameras makes you wonder what exactly they're capable of. They're very true to real-life animatronics. There's this foreboding mystery about them that ultimately makes them appear more like monsters than they do kid-friendly characters. Parts of FNAF 1 make me feel like lightning was captured in a bottle, and it's no wonder at all why it became a horror game classic. Now, with all the good that I just discussed about the first game, how could the fourth possibly outdo it? Well, like this. You don't even have to lay eyes on an animatronic to see how this game scares players in a superior way to the first game. There's no cameras in FNAF 4. The only environments you can look at are your bedroom, your closet, your bed, and your hallways. With the limited opportunity to create a liminal atmosphere like the first game, the developer, Scott Cawthon, knew that he was going to have to scare the players with a different approach to the environment, one that was based on familiarity and the ordinary. Think back through the history of horror media. Though there are some exceptions, there are so many classics that scared people with threats that were all too real. The greatest example of this is the movie Jaws. This movie had 80s kids terrified to swim in their backyard pools, let alone the ocean. This is also why the phrase based on a true story is used so much in horror. The stronger the basis is to real life, the scarier the media is. It's funny, the statement is totally correct for the first game too. A children's arcade and pizzeria is a very real setting for a horror game, but FNAF 4's approach is even better. FNAF 4 targets the universal fear of the monster in your closet, the monster waiting for you outside your bedroom door, and the monster under your bed. A bedroom at night is a scary place for a child. You have nothing to keep you company besides the crickets throwing their voice, the outside weather, and the occasional bump in the night. The way that FNAF 4 does this in particular is brilliant. Sound is a huge part of this game's atmosphere. Though prior entries took advantage of sound as well, it was never done quite like this. While these monsters approach you from every angle, the only thing to keep you company is a symphony of a grandfather clock, disembodied laughs, the rain, wind chimes, a dog, a radio, crickets, and most importantly, the sounds of footsteps. I sure wonder who turned on the radio. I wonder what's making those footsteps. I wonder what's making that dog bark. What ties all of this together is the ominous droning sound that buzzes in the player's ear constantly, reminding them of the predators working to make their way inside your room. It's masterful how well all of this is done, and truthfully, this alone made it somewhat difficult for me to play. I have a really high tolerance for this stuff. Horror games are my absolute favorite media to consume. But FNAF 4 made me feel like a kid again in the most terrifying way. You never get to see the animatronics very often in this game. The only time you get a good look at them is during your death jump scare. This makes them infinitely scarier. Through seeing the animatronics in the first game so much, by the third or fourth night, you get somewhat desensitized by their presence, despite how uncanny it is. This cannot be said about Five Nights at Freddy's 4. This perfect atmosphere doesn't just exist during the night sections, it also lingers during the minigames and the fun with plush traps sections. What I love about the atmosphere of the minigames are the constant laughs that can be heard throughout the house. The developer really did an amazing job with this haunting laughter. The atmosphere is definitely the weakest in the fun with plush traps sections, since there's little going on in terms of audio besides your little pal plush trap, but it gets the job done. A common criticism that I've heard to detract from the atmosphere of the fourth game is the animatronic designs. Critics say that they're over-designed, and that real animatronics don't look anything like this. While I can totally understand this in a vacuum, you have to think about the context that these monsters are appearing in. These aren't robot animals that live in a pizzeria like previous games. These are nightmare-dwelling monsters created by the medicated mind of a dying boy. Our protagonist is an innocent boy that had his head crushed in the mouth of one of the animatronics thanks to the negligent bullying of his brother. If that wasn't bad enough, you're playing as the boy in his nightmares desperately fighting against his trauma. I can't think of a more depressing situation than that. The way that the gameplay is set up in FNAF 4 is significantly scarier than previous entries. In the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, the player had to check the doorways for Bonnie and Chica while using the camera to check on Foxy and Freddy. Checking and closing the doors takes a fraction of a second to do, and even the slightest glance at Freddy alone can keep you safe as long as you do it often enough. There isn't much to challenge the player in terms of time management and decision making. This is why I find FNAF 4's gameplay to be scarier. In the fourth game, you have to similarly check 2 doors for Bonnie and Chica, but there's a catch this time. You can't flash your light on them all willy-nilly like you can in the first game, and closing the door prematurely can get you killed. When you approach one of your doors, you'll need to choose carefully between shining your flashlight down the hallway and shutting the door. If you shine your flashlight when a monster is right outside your door, you're cooked. The only time your flashlight comes in handy is when you shine it on a nightmare that's at the end of the hallway, before they get to your door. This will scare the animatronic into hiding out of sight, buying you a little bit of time before their next attack. Only when an animatronic is outside your door can you shut it and make them go away. You may be asking, how do you know if one of them is outside your door? This is where the scariest part of FNAF 4 comes in: the audio. When checking a door, you need to listen carefully for the sound of breathing in the darkness. If you hear breathing, you better shut that door and listen closely for the sound of them walking away. If you don't hear breathing, shine your light in hopes of scaring them off. Yeah, that's right. You need to get as close to your worst nightmares as possible in order to determine the right course of action. And if you misjudge the situation, this happens. It's so terrifying, and it puts a ton of pressure on the player. You also have to deal with Freddy. He's actually pretty simple. You just shine your light on your bed and make his little, frettles disappear throughout the night. This really is the tip of the iceberg, though. Oh, sick, my pizza's done. The coolest part of the gameplay here, in my opinion, is Foxy. Foxy starts out with Bonnie and Chica beyond the hallways. While in your room, you'll occasionally hear something running in one of your hallways. That's Foxy. You'll have to run over to one of the doors to scare him off. If you do this properly, you'll hear him run away. If you fail to scare him away, you'll hear him enter your closet, and you'll have to routinely run up and close the closet on him to keep him at bay. The backbreaking part of this is having a whole new threat to constantly check up on. The workload without Foxy is so much more manageable than with him in your closet, but it's never impossible. Foxy throws a wrench into everything even before he gets into your closet. Sometimes you'll have to neglect Freddy in order to check the hallway that Foxy is running down. If you hear Chica walking down your hallway right as Foxy sneaks into your closet, you're gonna have to hope that Chica spares you long enough to deal with them. Not only are your time management skills being tested, but your decision-making skills are too. That's the scariest part of this game. When you have to consistently make correct decisions to save yourself from animatronic monsters, that pressure terrifies the player. I also credit this game with the inclusion of minigames and the Fun with Plush Trap sections. The minigames flesh out the plot in such an emotional way, while Fun with Plush Trap is a nice change of pace, even if it is a little simple. The real cherry on top here is the game's final boss, Nightmare Fredbear. This is a nightmare version of the very animatronic that our character got his skull crushed in. It really makes the last night feel like a real climax, and overall, it makes the game feel like a complete package. Five Nights at Freddy's 4, to me, is definitely the scariest game in the series. I don't even think it's ridiculous to say that it's one of the scariest games that I've played so far. This atmosphere mixed with the gameplay oppresses the player like no other, and it makes for a super unique experience. I know it may seem weird to say that a game this small is so terrifying, but it's true. It's a shame that the bigger entry in the series, Security Breach, lacked this level of atmosphere and gameplay. Luckily though, the new Secret of the Mimic Fnaf game looks to be super promising. Maybe this game can take some notes from Fnaf 4, and maybe, just maybe, Fnaf's scariest game will be dethroned.